I returned from the notary that Tuesday afternoon, my heart practically bursting with excitement. I couldn't wait to tell my son Marquise and my daughter-in-law Loretta the incredible news. My dear brother had left me 3 beautiful apartments and a stunning beach house in his will. After months of grief following his passing, this felt like his final gift of love to me. I rushed up the front steps of my home, keys jingling in my trembling hands, rehearsing how I'd share this life-changing moment with my family. But as I reached for the door handle, I heard their familiar voices drifting from inside. Something made me pause. Maybe it was the hushed, secretive tone, or perhaps some maternal instinct that had kept me alive for 62 years. I stayed quiet, hidden there in my own hallway like a stranger in my own home. What I heard next didn't just surprise me, it froze me in terror. I want to pause here, because I'm so grateful you're here with me right now. If this story is resonating with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It means the world to me. And I'm curious, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this tale of justice and survival has traveled across the world. Your support gives me strength to share what happened next. Hello, my name is Beverly Adams, and I'm 62 years old. What I'm about to tell you will shake you to your core, just like it shattered everything I thought I knew about the people I loved most. That day started like any other Tuesday. I'd spent the morning running errands, grocery shopping, picking up prescriptions, the usual routine of a woman my age. I'd been living in the same house for over 30 years, the place where I raised Marquise as a single mother after his father left us when he was just 7. This house held every birthday party, every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every proud moment watching my boy grow into a man. For the past 6 months, since my brother passed, Marquise and Loretta had been staying with me. They said it was to help me through my grief, to make sure I wasn't lonely in this big house. I was touched by their concern. My son had always been protective, and Loretta seemed so caring, always asking about my day, making sure I was eating properly. But as I stood frozen in that hallway, still clutching my purse and the inheritance papers from the notary, I heard Loretta's voice cutting through the afternoon silence, like a blade. We need to document everything, Marquise. Every time she forgets where she put her keys, every time she repeats a story. The lawyer said judges love medical evidence of cognitive decline. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. Marquise's voice responded, and I barely recognized it. Gone was the warm tone of the son who used to call me Mama with such love. She's been more confused lately. Yesterday, she couldn't remember if she'd taken her medication. Perfect, Loretta continued, and I could hear papers rustling. I've been keeping notes in this journal. Look, March 15th. Beverly couldn't find her reading glasses for 20 minutes. March 22nd. Beverly asked me twice if I'd seen her blue sweater. We have months of this. The world tilted beneath my feet. Those weren't signs of cognitive decline. Those were normal moments of a woman living her life, the kind of small forgetfulness that happens to everyone. But they were twisting these innocent moments into evidence against me. The Guardian paperwork is almost ready, Marquise said, his voice growing more confident. Once we get the court to declare her incompetent, we'll have control of everything. Her bank accounts, the house, all of it. And she trusts us completely, Loretta added with what sounded like satisfaction. She has no idea we've been screening her phone calls and keeping her isolated from her friends. That Nancy woman has been calling for weeks, but I just tell Beverly she never called.
Nancy.
My dear friend Nancy, who I'd wondered about. I thought she'd forgotten about me during this difficult time, but they'd been lying, cutting me off from my support system like predators isolating their prey. The timing is perfect, Marquise continued. She's vulnerable from grief, and everyone expects older people to decline after losing family. No one will question it. I pressed my back against the wall, fighting the urge to vomit. This was my son, the baby I'd rocked to sleep, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, working double shifts as a nurse just to keep food on our table. I'd given him everything I had, every dream I deferred, every opportunity I'd created from nothing. And this was how he repaid me. But then something unexpected happened. Through the devastating shock and betrayal, a different emotion began to rise. Not just hurt, but a cold, calculating anger. They thought I was a confused old woman they could manipulate and control. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I quietly backed away from the door, slipped outside, and sat in my car for 20 minutes, my hands shaking as I processed what I'd just learned. The inheritance papers from my brother's estate lay on the passenger seat, 3 apartments, and a beach house they knew nothing about yet. A plan began forming in my mind. If they wanted to play games with the supposedly declining woman, I'd give them exactly what they expected to see. I walked back into that house wearing the mask of the confused, trusting mother they needed me to be. But inside, Beverly Adams was wide awake and ready for war. But you want to know what happened the very next day? The universe has a twisted sense of timing because that Wednesday morning, I had an appointment that would change everything once again. I sat in the parking lot of Morrison and Associates law firm, staring at the brass nameplate on the building. My brother David's attorney had called me 3 days earlier, asking me to come in for the final reading of the will. I thought it would be routine paperwork, maybe a few family photos, his old watch, something sentimental to remember him by. The morning air was crisp as I walked through those heavy oak doors, my sensible shoes clicking against marble floors that had probably witnessed decades of life-changing moments. Mrs. Morrison, a woman about my age with kind eyes and silver hair, greeted me in her mahogany-paneled office. "Beverly, please sit down," she said, sliding a thick folder across her desk. "Your brother was very specific about his wishes." I opened that folder with trembling fingers, expecting to see a modest inheritance, maybe enough to pay off some bills or take a small vacation. Instead, my eyes widened as I read property deed after property deed. 3 apartment buildings. 3 fully occupied, income-generating apartment buildings in the heart of downtown, each worth more than my house. And then, at the bottom of the stack, the deed to a coastal property, a beach house overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, complete with private beach access. "This cannot be right," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Mrs. Morrison smiled gently. "Your brother was quite successful with his real estate investments, Beverly. He wanted everything to go to you. The rental income alone from those apartments will provide you with financial security for the rest of your life." The numbers swam before my eyes. Monthly rental income that exceeded my annual nursing pension. Properties worth more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. My baby brother, who I'd helped raise after our parents died, had become wealthy and left it all to me. But then Mrs. Morrison's expression grew serious. "There is something else, Beverly. David left you a personal letter. He insisted I give it to you privately." She handed me an envelope with my name written in David's familiar handwriting. Inside, his words hit me like a physical blow. "Beverly, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I pray you're safe. I worry about people changing when money enters the picture. Be careful who you trust with this information. Real family protects you, fake family protects themselves. Watch for the signs. Love, your baby brother David." The irony was so sharp it nearly cut me in half. Here I was, holding the keys to financial freedom, while my own son and daughter-in-law were plotting to steal everything I already had. I drove home in a daze, those legal documents secure in my purse, like weapons I didn't yet know how to use. The spring afternoon should have felt celebratory. I was now a wealthy woman, free from financial worry forever. Instead, every mile toward home felt like driving toward a battlefield where the enemy wore familiar faces. As I pulled into my driveway, I could see Marquise and Loretta through the living room window. They were sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Marquise with homework for 12 years, where we'd shared countless family dinners. Now it felt like enemy territory. I sat in my car for several minutes, watching them through the glass. Loretta was writing in what I now knew was her evidence journal, documenting my supposed decline. Marquise was on his phone, probably talking to their lawyer about guardianship proceedings. They looked so comfortable, so confident in their deception. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the inheritance papers and walked toward my own front door, preparing to face the people who thought they knew exactly who they were dealing with. "Hi there," I called out as I entered, my voice deliberately cheerful and slightly vague. "How are my lovely children doing today?" Loretta immediately closed her journal and smiled that practiced smile I now recognized as completely false. "Oh, Beverly, there you are. We were getting worried about you. Were you now?" I asked, setting my purse down carefully and studying their faces. Amazing how different people looked when you finally saw them clearly. "Just running errands, dear." Marquise stood up and gave me what I once thought was a caring hug. Now I felt the calculation in it, the way he held me just a moment too long, as if assessing my mental state. "Mom, you seem a little tired," he said, his voice carrying that patronizing tone I was only now noticing. "Maybe you should rest this afternoon." "Maybe so," I agreed, playing the part they needed me to play. It has been quite the day. But as I walked toward my bedroom, those inheritance papers burning like fire in my purse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Pure, crystalline clarity. They thought they were manipulating a confused old woman, but they had no idea they were actually dealing with someone who now had resources they couldn't even imagine. The beach house David had left me was 2 hours away, far enough to disappear if I needed to, close enough to access quickly. The apartments would provide income whether I lived here or anywhere else in the world. For the first time in months, I had options they knew nothing about. That night, I lay in bed listening to their whispered conversations through the thin walls, their voices carrying plans to slowly increase my supposed confusion, to document more evidence, to move faster with the guardianship proceedings. Little did they know I was already 3 steps ahead of them. And tomorrow, the real game would begin. That night, after Marquise and Loretta had finally gone to bed, I sat at my small writing desk by the bedroom window. The house was quiet except for the familiar sounds of settling wood and distant traffic. I pulled out David's letter again, reading it by the soft glow of my bedside lamp. But there was more to his letter. Parts 1 hadn't fully processed in Mrs. Morrison's office, while my mind was reeling from the inheritance news. "Beverly," his familiar handwriting continued, "I've seen what money does to families. I've watched good people become strangers when inheritance is involved. If anyone starts treating you differently after my death, controlling your access to information, isolating you from friends, making you doubt your own mind, those are not the actions of people who love you. Those are the actions of people who see you as an obstacle to overcome." My hands trembled as I read on. It was as if David had somehow seen into the future, predicting exactly what would happen to me. "Keep your own records. Trust your instincts. And remember, real family doesn't need to control you to love you. They especially don't need legal guardianship to care for you. Anyone who suggests otherwise is not thinking of your best interests. I'm giving you resources, so you'll never have to depend on anyone who would hurt you. Use them wisely. Use them to protect yourself." I set the letter down and looked around my bedroom, the room where I'd raised my son alone, where I'd worried about paying bills for decades, where I'd cried myself to sleep after working double shifts at the hospital just to keep us afloat. Now everything felt different, tainted by the knowledge of what Marquise and Loretta were planning. I pulled out a fresh notebook from my desk drawer, one of those composition books I used to buy for Marquise's school projects. On the first page, I wrote, "Record of truth," and the date. If they were documenting fictional evidence of my decline, I would document the very real evidence of their deception. March 28th, overheard M and L discussing guardianship plans. L keeping journal of evidence against me. They've been screening my phone calls and isolating me from friends. As I wrote, memories began flooding back with painful clarity. All those times over the past months when I'd felt confused or isolated, it hadn't been my age or grief clouding my judgment. It had been their systematic manipulation. March 15th, L told me Nancy hadn't called. But Nancy calls every Sunday, without fail. Has been calling for weeks according to their conversation. February 22nd, M suggested I stop driving alone. Said I seemed disoriented after grocery shopping. But I navigated those stores perfectly fine. He just wanted me dependent on them for transportation. February 10th, L helped me organize my banking. Insisted on being present for all transactions. Said it was to protect me from scams. Now I realized she was monitoring my financial access. The more I wrote, the clearer the pattern became. They hadn't moved in to help me grieve. They'd moved in to execute a long-term plan. Every concern about my well-being had been calculated manipulation. I thought about Nancy, my dear friend of 20 years. We'd worked together at the hospital, shared countless coffee breaks and life stories. She would never just stop calling without reason. They'd been stealing my friendships along with everything else. At 2 a.m, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I picked up my phone and dialed Nancy's number, praying she was a light sleeper. Beverly? Oh my goodness, is that really you? Nancy's voice was filled with relief and concern. I've been so worried. I've been calling for weeks. Nancy, dear friend, I whispered, stepping into my closet and closing the door so my voice wouldn't carry. I know you have been calling. They've been lying to me. Who has been lying?
What are you talking about?
The whole story poured out of me in hushed tones, the overheard conversation, the fake journal entries, the guardianship plot. Nancy listened with growing horror. Beverly, this is elder abuse, she said, her nursing training immediately kicking in. This is exactly what we used to see at the hospital, family members isolating patients to gain control of their assets. There's more, Nancy. I told her about the inheritance, about David's warning, about the resources I now had at my disposal. Listen to me carefully, Nancy said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone I remembered from our hospital days. You need to document everything. Get copies of their evidence journal if you can. Record conversations if possible. And most importantly, don't let them know you're aware of what they're doing. I've started keeping my own records, I whispered. Good thinking. Beverly, you're one of the smartest women I know. Trust your instincts. They've always been sharp. This confusion and memory problems they're documenting? None of that matches the woman I've known for decades. After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: validation. Nancy's words reminded me of who I really was. Beverly Adams, a woman who had raised a child alone, who had worked in life-or-death situations at the hospital, who had never backed down from a challenge. I spent the rest of the night adding more entries to my truth journal, reconstructing months of manipulation I'd mistaken for care. Every helpful suggestion that had isolated me further. Every concern that had made me doubt my own competence. Every lie that had separated me from my support system. March 1st, Elle insisted on handling all phone calls because I seemed overwhelmed. Actually screening my communications. February 18th, M suggested I stop managing my own checkbook. Said mistakes were concerning. What mistakes? My accounts were perfectly balanced. January 30th, Elle recommended I stop hosting book club. Said entertaining seemed stressful for me. Really wanted to eliminate my social connections. As dawn broke through my bedroom window, I realized David's warning had come just in time. They thought they were dealing with a vulnerable, isolated woman with limited resources and no allies. Instead, they were about to face Beverly Adams, a woman with newfound wealth, restored friendships, and a clear understanding of exactly what they were trying to steal from her. The hunter had become the hunted, and they had absolutely no idea what was coming for them. 3 days after my conversation with Nancy, their plan escalated in ways that made my blood run cold. I was in my bedroom Thursday evening when I heard Loretta on the phone in the hallway, speaking in that hushed tone I'd learned to recognize as dangerous. Dr. Martinez? This is Loretta Chen. I'm calling about my mother-in-law, Beverly Adams. We need to schedule that neurological evaluation we discussed. My heart stopped. There was no Dr. Martinez that I knew of. I hadn't agreed to any neurological evaluation. I pressed my ear closer to the door. Yes, she's been showing significant cognitive decline, Loretta continued, her voice dripping with false concern. Memory loss, confusion, difficulty with basic tasks. We're very worried about her safety. Every word was a carefully crafted lie. I crept closer to my bedroom door, my pulse hammering in my throat. Tuesday morning works perfectly, she said. And doctor, we may need to ensure she's calm for the evaluation. She's been resistant to medical care lately. Could you recommend something mild to help with her anxiety? The implication hit me like a physical blow. They were planning to drug me before this fake evaluation, making sure I'd appear confused and disoriented to whatever doctor they'd found to participate in their scheme. Excellent advice, doctor. A mild sedative in her morning tea should work perfectly. She'll never know the difference. I backed away from the door, my legs shaking. They weren't just planning to steal my assets, they were willing to chemically subdue me to do it. This had gone far beyond simple financial manipulation into something truly sinister. That night, I lay awake listening to their whispered conversation through the thin walls. Their voices carried the confidence of people who believed victory was within reach. The evaluation is Tuesday at 10. Loretta's voice drifted through the darkness. I've already prepared the sedative. Just a mild dose in her breakfast tea, enough to make her seem confused and compliant. Marquise's response chilled me to the bone. And after the doctor declares her incompetent. We move fast, Loretta replied. File the guardianship papers immediately. By Wednesday, we'll have legal control of everything. Her bank accounts, this house, all of it. What about her friends? That Nancy woman has been persistent. Once we have guardianship, we control all her communications. We can legally isolate her completely. Tell everyone she's too confused for visitors. I pressed my face into my pillow to muffle the sound of my breathing. They were planning to erase my entire existence, turning me into a prisoner in my own life. The timing is perfect, Marquise continued. She's been acting more confused lately anyway. That's because I've been increasing the dose gradually, Loretta said with satisfaction. Just a tiny amount in her evening tea for the past 2 weeks. Nothing dangerous, just enough to make her seem foggy and disoriented. The room spun around me. They'd already been drugging me. All those evenings when I'd felt unusually tired, when my thoughts seemed cloudy, it hadn't been grief or age. It had been them, slowly poisoning me to support their narrative. After Tuesday, we won't need to be subtle anymore, Loretta added. Once she's declared incompetent, we can control her medication completely. I waited until their conversation died down and their bedroom door closed. Then, with trembling fingers, I reached for my phone and dialed Mrs. Morrison's emergency number. The attorney had given it to me after our meeting, saying David had insisted his sister have access to legal help at any hour. Mrs. Morrison? I whispered when she answered. This is Beverly Adams. I need help immediately. Beverly, what's wrong? It's nearly midnight. They're going to drug me on Tuesday morning. They're planning to have me declared incompetent at a fake medical evaluation. The words tumbled out of me in a rush. Slow down, dear. Tell me everything. I explained the overheard conversations, the planned sedation, the guardianship scheme. Mrs. Morrison listened with growing alarm. Beverly, this is serious criminal behavior. We need to get you somewhere safe immediately. Can you meet me somewhere? I need to gather evidence first. There's a 24-hour diner on Harbor Street near my office. Can you get there safely? I think so. Give me 2 hours. After hanging up, I moved through my house like a ghost, gathering everything I needed. My truth journal, copies of the inheritance papers, my identification documents, bank statements they didn't know I'd hidden in my bedroom. I photographed Loretta's evidence journal while they slept. My phone's camera flash turned off. In the kitchen, I found the small bottle hidden behind the flour canister, unmarked drops that explained weeks of confusion and fatigue. I photographed that too, evidence of their systematic poisoning. At exactly 1:15 in the morning, I slipped out through my back door into the cold spring night. The rain had started, creating perfect cover for my escape. I left my car in the driveway, they'd notice if it was gone, and walked the 8 blocks to Harbor Street through back alleys and side streets I'd known since childhood. Mrs. Morrison was waiting in a corner booth at the diner, a pot of coffee and a notepad already on the table. When she saw me walk in, soaked and shaking, her face hardened with determination. Beverly, you did the right thing. We're going to stop them before they can hurt you any further. As I slid into that vinyl booth, surrounded by the warm safety of fluorescent lights and the smell of coffee, I realized something profound. I wasn't running away from my problems anymore. I was running toward justice. Mrs. Morrison poured me a steaming cup of coffee, her eyes scanning my face with the sharp attention of someone who'd spent decades protecting vulnerable clients. The fluorescent lights of the all-night diner cast harsh shadows, but I felt safer than I had in months. "Beverly, show me everything you've collected," she said, sliding a legal pad across the sticky table. I opened my purse with trembling hands, spreading out my truth journal, the photographs of Loretta's evidence collection, and the pictures of that unmarked bottle they'd been using to drug my evening tea. Mrs. Morrison's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. "This is textbook elder abuse," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They've been systematically isolating you, documenting fabricated evidence, and chemically sedating you to support their narrative of cognitive decline." "What do we do now?" I asked, wrapping my cold hands around the coffee mug. "First, we need to get you a legitimate medical evaluation to prove your mental competency. Then we file police reports for attempted guardianship fraud and elder abuse. But most importantly, we need to secure your inheritance legally before they realize you're gone." At 3 a.m, Mrs. Morrison drove me to the emergency room at Memorial Hospital, where Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Loretta, thankfully, conducted a comprehensive cognitive assessment. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was voluntarily seeking the exact evaluation they'd planned to force on me under chemical sedation. "Mrs. Adams, your cognitive function is completely normal for your age," Dr. Chen announced after 2 hours of testing. "Your memory, reasoning, and decision-making abilities are all within excellent ranges. I see no signs of dementia, confusion, or cognitive decline whatsoever." She handed me official documentation of my mental competency, stamped and signed. "If anyone questions your ability to make your own decisions, this evaluation will stand up in any courtroom." By dawn, we were at the police station. Detective Maria Rodriguez listened to my story with the focused attention of someone who'd seen similar cases before. She recorded my statement, photographed the evidence, and immediately opened an investigation into attempted elder fraud. "Mrs. Adams, what you're describing is more common than people realize," Detective Rodriguez explained. "Adult children targeting aging parents for financial exploitation is one of the fastest-growing crimes in our jurisdiction." "Can you arrest them today?" I asked. "We need to build a stronger case first, but we can certainly prevent them from following through with their Tuesday plan. We'll also need to coordinate with Adult Protective Services." "What should I do about going home?" Detective Rodriguez exchanged a look with Mrs. Morrison. "I wouldn't recommend returning to that house until we've made arrests. Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" Mrs. Morrison smiled for the first time that night. "Actually, Beverly owns property they know nothing about." By Thursday afternoon, I was standing in the living room of my inherited beach house, watching waves crash against the private shoreline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The house was fully furnished, beautifully maintained, and completely ready for occupancy. David had left me more than just financial security. He'd left me a sanctuary. "Your brother was incredibly thorough," Mrs. Morrison said, reviewing the property documents. "This house is in a trust that your son and daughter-in-law have no legal access to, even if they'd somehow succeeded with their guardianship scheme." I walked through rooms filled with David's tasteful furniture and family photographs, feeling his presence like a protective embrace. In the master bedroom, I found another letter on the nightstand, waiting for me. "Beverly, if you're reading this in this house, it means you needed somewhere safe to go. This is your sanctuary now. The monthly rental income from the apartments will be directly deposited into the account number below, an account only you have access to. Live freely, sister. You've earned your peace." That evening, I called Nancy from the beach house's landline, telling her about my escape and newfound safety. Her relief was palpable through the phone lines. "Beverly, I'm so proud of you," she said. "You trusted your instincts and saved yourself." "But Nancy, the hardest part is coming. They think I'm missing or confused. They have no idea I know about their plan. What happens next? Tuesday morning, they'll try to drug my breakfast tea and take me to that fake evaluation. Except I won't be there." Mrs. Morrison had already coordinated with Detective Rodriguez. When Marquise and Loretta discovered my absence Tuesday morning, they'd likely panic and possibly contact police themselves, claiming I was a confused elderly woman who'd wandered off. That's when law enforcement would spring their trap. They'll probably file a missing person report, Mrs. Morrison explained during our evening strategy session. When they do, they'll be walking straight into our investigation. Saturday afternoon, I received a call that brought everything into sharp focus. Detective Rodriguez's voice was grave, but satisfied. Mrs. Adams, we've been monitoring your home since Thursday. They've been calling hospitals and morgues, supposedly searching for you. But here's the interesting part. They also contacted their attorney about accelerating the guardianship proceedings, claiming your disappearance proves your mental incompetence. Even while thinking I might be dead or injured, they're still focused on stealing my assets? That tells us everything we need to know about their priorities. The detective replied. Sunday night, I sat on the beach house deck, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I'd been preparing for all week. They thought they were dealing with a confused, drugged, isolated woman who'd wandered off in a state of dementia. Instead, they were about to face Beverly Adams, fully competent, legally protected, and ready to fight back with resources they couldn't imagine. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and they had absolutely no idea what was waiting for them. 2 weeks later, I sat in the back corner of courtroom 3B, wearing my navy blue dress, the one I'd worn to David's funeral, now transformed into armor for battle. Marquise and Loretta sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, Mr. Hoffman, a thin man with calculating eyes who specialized in what he probably called elder care law. They had no idea I was there. As far as they knew, Beverly Adams was still missing, probably wandering confused somewhere, proving their case that I needed immediate guardianship protection. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. Judge Patricia Morales called the case to order. In the matter of guardianship petition for Beverly Adams, age 62, filed by Marquise Adams. Mr. Hoffman stood up, his voice dripping with practiced concern. Your Honor, we're here today because Mrs. Beverly Adams is a vulnerable elderly woman suffering from severe cognitive decline. She's been missing for 2 weeks, having wandered away from her home in what we believe was a confused state. I watched Marquise nod solemnly, playing the worried son to perfection. Loretta dabbed at her eyes with tissues, the picture of a devoted daughter-in-law overwhelmed by family tragedy. We have extensive documentation of Mrs. Adams' deteriorating mental state, Hoffman continued, producing Loretta's fabricated journal. Memory loss, confusion, inability to manage basic daily tasks. Her disappearance only confirms our worst fears about her capacity for self-care. And where is Mrs. Adams now? Judge Morales asked. Unknown, Your Honor. We've filed missing person reports. We fear she may have harmed herself due to her confused state. Judge Morales frowned. This is highly irregular, proceeding with guardianship when the subject is missing. Which is exactly why we need emergency guardianship powers, Hoffman pressed. Someone needs legal authority to make decisions for her protection when she's found. That's when Mrs. Morrison stood up from the defendant's table, her voice carrying the authority of decades in family law. Your Honor, Mrs. Beverly Adams is not missing. She is present in this courtroom and ready to defend herself against these baseless accusations. The explosion of shock was immediate. Marquise's head whipped around, his face draining of color when he spotted me in the back row. Loretta actually gasped aloud, her tissue dabbing forgotten. Mr. Hoffman's mouth fell open like a fish struggling for air. Mrs. Adams, please approach the bench, Judge Morales said, her eyebrows raised with interest. I walked down that courthouse aisle like a bride approaching an altar, except the ceremony was about reclaiming my life instead of giving it away. Every step felt powerful, deliberate, final. Your Honor, I said, my voice clear and strong. I am Beverly Adams. I am 62 years old, mentally competent, and I absolutely oppose this guardianship petition. Judge Morales studied my face carefully. Mrs. Adams, your son and daughter-in-law claim you've been missing for 2 weeks due to cognitive confusion. I wasn't missing, Your Honor. I was hiding from people who were systematically drugging me, documenting false evidence of mental decline, and planning to steal my assets through fraudulent guardianship. The courtroom erupted. Hoffman jumped to his feet, objecting loudly. Marquise and Loretta were whispering frantically to each other. Judge Morales banged her gavel for order. Mrs. Morrison, please present your evidence, the judge commanded. Mrs. Morrison stood with the confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. Your Honor, we have extensive documentation proving this guardianship petition is based entirely on fabricated evidence and attempted elder fraud. She presented my truth journal, the photographs of their evidence collection, the unmarked sedative bottle, and Dr. Chen's comprehensive cognitive evaluation. Each piece of evidence hit their case like a sledgehammer. Mrs. Adams underwent voluntary cognitive testing 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Morrison continued. Dr. Sarah Chen's evaluation shows completely normal mental function with no signs of cognitive decline whatsoever. Judge Morales reviewed the medical evaluation, her expression growing increasingly stern. Mr. Hoffman, how do you explain the discrepancy between your documented evidence and this professional medical assessment? Hoffman was scrambling now, his confidence evaporating. Your Honor, we believe Mrs. Adams may have been coached. Mrs. Morrison interrupted. Your Honor, Mrs. Adams has also filed police reports for attempted elder fraud. Detective Rodriguez is investigating systematic isolation, financial manipulation, and chemical sedation without consent. The judge's gaze moved to Marquise and Loretta, who looked like deer caught in headlights. Is this true? I stood up, my voice carrying 6 decades of strength and 2 weeks of righteous anger. Your Honor, may I address my son directly? Proceed, Mrs. Adams. I turned to face Marquise, the baby I'd rocked to sleep, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for. Marquise, you didn't lose your mother to cognitive decline. You sold her for money you thought you could steal. His face crumbled, but I wasn't finished. I worked double shifts for 12 years to give you everything you needed. I gave up dating, vacations, dreams, all for you. And you repaid me by drugging my tea and planning to erase my entire existence. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but my voice never wavered. I don't need a guardian, son. But you clearly need a conscience. Judge Morales had heard enough. She slammed her gavel with finality that echoed through the silent courtroom. Guardianship petition denied. Mr. Adams and Ms. Chen, I'm issuing restraining orders requiring you to stay away from Mrs. Adams pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. She leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. If you ever attempt to manipulate or exploit this woman again, you'll face the full consequences of the law. As I walked out of that courtroom into the afternoon sunlight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete, total freedom. The battle was over and Beverly Adams had won. I stepped through those courthouse doors into brilliant afternoon sunlight that felt like emerging from a cave after months of darkness. The spring air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of cherry blossoms from the courthouse lawn. For the first time in what felt like years, I could breathe freely. Mrs. Morrison walked beside me, her briefcase swinging with the satisfaction of a job well done. Beverly, how does it feel to have your life back? I paused on the courthouse steps, looking back at the building where justice had finally been served. It feels like resurrection, I said, surprising myself with the truth of those words. Behind us, Marquise and Loretta emerged with their defeated attorney, their faces masks of shock and rage. Marquise caught my eye for one brief moment, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Not my loving son, but a stranger who'd worn my son's face while planning my destruction. He opened his mouth as if to speak, maybe to apologize or explain, but I turned away. Some bridges, once burned, leave nothing but ashes. There was nothing left to say between us. Mrs. Adams? Detective Rodriguez appeared at my elbow, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes kind. We'll need you to come in next week for additional statements. The district attorney is considering formal charges. Whatever you need, I replied, my voice steady. I want to make sure this never happens to another family. As we drove away from the courthouse, I watched the city buildings give way to suburban neighborhoods, then to open highway leading toward the coast. Each mile felt like shedding old skin, transforming from victim back into the woman I'd always been before their manipulation began. "Beverly," Mrs. Morrison said as we pulled into the beach house driveway, "you have some decisions to make about your future. The restraining order protects you, but you'll need to decide what to do about your old house, your possessions." I looked up at the beautiful beach house that David had left me, my sanctuary, my new beginning. I think I'm exactly where I need to be. That evening, I called Nancy to share the news of our courtroom victory. Her joy was infectious, bubbling through the phone like champagne. "Beverly, I'm so proud of you. You fought back and won." "Nancy, would you like to come visit me this weekend? I have this beautiful guest room overlooking the ocean." "Try to stop me," she laughed. "I'll bring wine, and we'll celebrate properly." After hanging up, I walked out onto the deck, where waves crashed rhythmically against the private beach. The sound was hypnotic, washing away months of anxiety and fear. I thought about revenge, how satisfying it would be to use my newfound wealth to make their lives difficult, to pursue every legal avenue for punishment. But standing there in the salt air, watching seagulls dance across the horizon, I realized something profound. Revenge would only chain me to their toxicity. The greatest victory wasn't destroying them, it was building a life so fulfilling they became irrelevant. Over the following weeks, I began establishing routines that felt like coming home to myself. Morning walks on the beach with coffee and a travel mug, watching sunrise paint the water gold and pink. Afternoon reading in the sun-drenched living room, diving into novels I'd never had time for during my working years. I enrolled in a creative writing class at the local community college, something I'd dreamed about since high school but never pursued. The professor, a woman my age named Dr. Elizabeth Warren, encouraged us to write about our life experiences. "Your story has power," she told me after reading my first assignment about overcoming betrayal. "Have you considered that other women might benefit from hearing it?" That conversation planted a seed that grew into something beautiful. I started a blog called Sea of Second Chances, sharing my story and inviting other women to share theirs. Stories of survival, reinvention, and finding strength in unexpected places. The response was overwhelming. Women from across the country wrote to tell me about their own experiences with family betrayal, financial abuse, and the courage it took to rebuild. My inbox filled with messages that made me cry and laugh and feel profoundly connected to a sisterhood I hadn't known existed. "Dear Beverly," one letter read, "I'm 74 and my daughter was doing the exact same thing to me. Reading your story gave me the courage to get help. Thank you for showing me I wasn't crazy." 3 months after the courthouse victory, I was hosting my first beach house gathering for local women who'd reached out through the blog. 8 women, ages 55 to 82, sitting on my deck sharing stories over homemade soup and wine. To Second Chances, Martha, a 70-year-old widow, raised her glass as the sun set over the water. To Choosing Ourselves, added Jennifer, who'd escaped an abusive marriage at 68. "To Beverly," said Nancy, squeezing my hand, "for showing us all that it's never too late to fight back." That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone on the deck with David's final letter in my hands. I read his words again. "Live freely, sister. You've earned your peace." The monthly rental income from the 3 apartment buildings had started flowing into my new account, more money than I'd ever imagined having. But the real wealth wasn't financial. It was the knowledge that I'd saved myself, that I'd chosen dignity over bitterness, that I'd built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. I looked up at stars reflecting on the water, feeling something I hadn't experienced since childhood, complete faith in my own strength and judgment. Beverly Adams was finally, fully, gloriously free. For months later, I woke to the sound of waves gently lapping against the shore outside my bedroom window. The early morning light filtered through sheer curtains, casting dancing patterns on the hardwood floors that David had so carefully chosen. This daily awakening had become my favorite moment, that peaceful transition from sleep to consciousness, surrounded by beauty and safety. My morning routine had become sacred ritual. Coffee first, brewed strong in the kitchen overlooking the water, then out to the deck in my favorite blue robe to watch the sunrise paint the horizon in shades of coral and gold. The September air carried a hint of autumn's approach, but the ocean remained warm and welcoming. "Good morning, beautiful world," I whispered to the seagulls that had become my regular breakfast companions. They'd learned to expect the small pieces of toast I saved for them, gathering on the deck railing like feathered friends checking in on my well-being. At 8:30, I settled into my home office, David's former study that I'd transformed into my writing sanctuary. The Sea of Second Chances blog had grown beyond my wildest expectations. What started as my personal story of survival had become a thriving community of women supporting each other through life's most challenging transitions. My laptop screen filled with new messages from readers across the globe. Today's inbox held particularly moving stories that made my heart both ache and soar. "Dear Beverly," wrote Patricia from Oregon, "I'm 58 and just discovered my husband has been hiding our retirement savings. Your story gave me courage to hire a lawyer. Thank you for showing me I'm not powerless." Another message from Maria in Texas. "After reading your blog, I realized my adult children were financially abusing me too. I moved out last week, and I'm staying with my sister. For the first time in years, I feel like myself again." These messages reminded me daily why sharing my painful experience had been so important. Every woman who found strength through my story justified the vulnerability of putting my private trauma into public view. By 10 o'clock, I was walking the beach with Nancy, who'd started visiting every Tuesday for what we called our wisdom walks. These weekly conversations had become the highlight of both our weeks, two old friends reconnecting after years of letting life get in the way. "Beverly, you look younger every time I see you," Nancy said, linking her arm through mine as we strolled along the water's edge. "There's something different about your face now." "What do you mean?" "The worry lines are disappearing. You're not constantly looking over your shoulder anymore. You move like a woman who owns her space." She was right. The hypervigilance that had marked my final months in that house, always listening for whispered conversations, always doubting my own perceptions, had gradually melted away. Now I moved through my days with the confidence of someone who trusted her environment completely. "Nancy, do you ever think about forgiveness?" I asked as we picked up smooth shells along the shoreline. "What kind of forgiveness?" "Marquise sent another letter last week. Third one this month. He says he wants to make amends, that he realizes what they did was wrong." Nancy stopped walking and studied my face carefully. "What does your heart tell you?" "That some wounds change you permanently, and that's not necessarily bad. I'm not the same trusting woman I was 6 months ago. I'm more careful now, more protective of my peace." "And that's exactly how you should be," Nancy said firmly. "Forgiveness doesn't mean putting yourself back in harm's way. It means not letting their poison continue destroying your happiness." After Nancy's visit, I spent the afternoon working on next week's blog post, titled "The Freedom of Chosen Solitude." The piece explored how society pressures women to maintain family relationships even when those relationships are toxic, and how there was profound strength in choosing your own well-being over others' expectations. My afternoon writing was interrupted by a video call from Dr. Warren, my creative writing professor who'd become both mentor and friend. Her weathered face filled my laptop screen, eyes bright with excitement. "Beverly, I have wonderful news. The literary magazine wants to publish your essay about rebuilding after betrayal. They're calling it one of the most powerful pieces they've received this year." "Really? They want my writing?" "Not just want it, they're featuring it as their cover story." "Beverly, you have a gift for transforming pain into hope. Have you considered writing a book?" After the call ended, I sat in my study watching fishing boats return to harbor as sunset approached.
A book.
6 months ago, I'd been fighting for basic autonomy, and now professors were encouraging me to share my voice with the world. Evening brought my favorite ritual, dinner on the deck while watching the sun sink into the ocean. Tonight's meal was simple: fresh fish from the local market, roasted vegetables from my new garden, and a glass of wine that tasted like celebration. As darkness settled over the water, I opened my laptop to write tomorrow's blog entry. The words flowed easily now, unlike those first painful posts where every sentence felt like emotional surgery. Dear friends, I began. Tonight, I want to talk about the unexpected gifts that come from surviving betrayal. When someone you love shows you their true character, believe them. When they show you that your well-being means nothing compared to their wants, accept that truth. But also know this: the space they leave behind when you remove them from your life, that space fills with better things. Self-respect.
Peace.
People who actually deserve your energy. I paused, listening to waves crash against the shore, feeling grateful for every painful step that had led me to this moment of complete contentment. Tomorrow would bring new stories from brave women, new opportunities to help others find their strength, new moments of simple joy in this life I'd fought so hard to reclaim. Beverly Adams was finally home. 6 months to the day after the courthouse victory, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox bearing familiar handwriting that made my stomach clench with old anxiety. Marquise's distinctive scrawl across cream-colored stationery, the expensive kind he'd always used for important occasions, back when I thought those occasions mattered. I carried the letter to my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd read David's final warning all those months ago. But this time, sunlight streamed through windows that belonged to me alone, and the ocean breeze carried no threats, only salt-scented peace. With steady hands, I opened the envelope and began to read. Dear Mom, it started, and even those 2 words felt like manipulation now. I know I have no right to write to you after what Loretta and I did. I know you probably never want to see me again. But I need you to know how sorry I am. The letter went on for 3 pages, filled with explanations that sounded like excuses. He claimed Loretta had influenced him, that financial pressure had clouded his judgment, that he'd never meant for things to go so far. He wrote about sleepless nights, about therapy sessions, about finally understanding the magnitude of their betrayal. I miss you every day, the letter continued. I miss calling you for advice, miss your laugh, miss knowing you're proud of me. I threw away the most important relationship in my life for money we didn't even need. I know that makes me a fool, but it also makes me desperate to earn your forgiveness. He wrote about wanting to rebuild our relationship, about how he'd left Loretta and was trying to become the man I'd raised him to be. He begged for one conversation, one chance to look me in the eyes and apologize properly. Please, Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm hoping you'll find it in your heart anyway. You taught me that families work through problems together. Can we try to work through this one? I set the letter down and walked out to my deck, needing the ocean's perspective on his words. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and dolphins were playing in the distance, their joy so pure and uncomplicated. Nancy called during my contemplation, as if sensing I needed wise counsel. He wrote again, didn't he? She said without preamble. How did you know? Because you sound the way you did after the last letter. Beverly, what does your gut tell you? I watched waves roll endlessly toward shore, each one different, but part of the same eternal rhythm. That some people confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. That he wants my absolution to ease his guilt, not because he truly understands what he stole from me. And what did he steal?
Trust. Safety.
The mother-son relationship I thought we had. The version of myself that could love unconditionally without protecting my heart. Those are profound losses, Beverly. The hardest part is that I don't miss him the way he wants me to. I miss the son I thought I had, but that person might never have existed. The real Marquise was capable of drugging my tea and planning to steal my freedom. How do you miss someone who is willing to erase your entire existence for money? That evening, I sat down to write a response I would never send. Sometimes the most important letters are the ones that remain unwritten, existing only to clarify our own hearts. Dear Marquise, I began, your apology assumes that enough remorse can undo attempted elder abuse. It can't. Your therapy sessions don't erase the nights I lay awake wondering if I was losing my mind while you and Loretta systematically drugged me. Your regret doesn't restore the months of isolation when you screened my calls and stole my friendships. You write about missing our relationship, but you destroyed our relationship when you chose greed over my well-being. The mother you miss? She died the day I overheard your plot. What remains is a woman who learned to protect herself from people who would exploit her love. I don't forgive you, son. Not because I'm cruel, but because forgiveness would require forgetting, and forgetting would make me vulnerable to being hurt like this again. Some wounds teach us essential lessons about boundaries and self-preservation. I never mailed that letter. Instead, I tore it into small pieces and scattered them in my garden, where they'd become compost for something beautiful and new. 2 weeks later, on a perfect October evening, I walked the beach as sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The sand was warm between my toes, and seabirds called their evening songs across the water. This had become my meditation time, when I reflected on the day and felt grateful for the life I'd reclaimed. A young couple walked past, holding hands and laughing at some private joke. Their joy reminded me of dreams I'd once had about growing old with someone special. But watching them, I realized something profound. I wasn't lonely in my solitude. I was complete. I paused at the water's edge, letting waves wash over my feet. The sun touched the horizon, turning the entire ocean into liquid gold. I learned that forgiveness isn't required for healing. I learned that some relationships don't survive honesty about what they actually were. I learned that chosen solitude is infinitely better than toxic company. A gentle wave rolled over my feet, warm and welcoming as I spoke into the sunset. My name is Beverly Adams. I'm 63 years old, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. If my story helps even one woman choose herself over people who would exploit her love, then sharing this pain was worth it. I turned away from the sunset and walked back toward my house, my sanctuary, my new beginning, my proof that it's never too late to save yourself. Some stories don't end with reconciliation, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes they end with something better. Peace. Did you like my story? And what city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Give us a like if you enjoyed this story. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. By the way, don't forget to subscribe. It encourages me to keep bringing more stories like this. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.